if you haven't gotten a snack, feel free to get some coffee or we have some cookies, and we do have door prizes. So I'm going to give you guys a couple more minutes to sign up for the door prize. Dr. Leonard, if you want to sign in. Gail, yes, there is a door prize for anyone, faculty, community, students, staff, everybody can register a door prize. You guys come on in. Ashley, did you register for a door prize? Register for a door prize? Come register. We need more people. We need more people to register for the door prize. Okay. Hey Vanessa, come on in. Register for the door prize over there. Okay, we'll just start in a couple of minutes, guys. Haven't gotten a cookie or something to drink?
Oh yeah, I'm a historian. I mean, I'm an artist, but I'm a historian as well. So yes, I'd love to see what you've got.
Okay, I'll give you my information.
Oh, great.
Yeah, my grandmother.
Okay, so while everybody's registering and getting a snack, I do want to thank you guys for being here today. This is our first ever, this is our premiere, our first ever Folklore Week here at ASU-Beebe, and we are very excited. I do have a couple of shout outs I want to do. I also want, where is the schedule? Everybody, what is coming up? Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So today we will have Dr. Floryshak speaking about Sleepy Hollow, and I'll introduce her in just a second. Tuesday, we have Professor Corey Davis, and he will be speaking on cryptids in Arkansas, origins and explanations, so kind of a psychological look at cryptids and why we believe what we believe. Wednesday, we have Dr. Natalie Underberg-Good, and she's a professor of games and interactive media at the Nicholson School of Communication at the University of Central Florida. And she will be presenting on the role and representation of shapeshifters in video games. So if you know anybody that's a gamer or anyone that likes video games, that would be a great one to come to. Thursday, we have The Legend of Casey Jones and the Haunting of the Allen House within Balladry. This is Dr. Gregory Hansen. He is professor of folklore and English at A-State in Jonesboro. And then Friday, our Halloween presentation is the Yazoo City Witch by Professor Amber Bramlett, Associate Professor of Education, and that will be 10 o'clock on Friday. Tomorrow's is at 12:30, by the way. It's going to be 12:30 on Tuesday, Wednesday at 9:30, Thursday at 9:30, and then Friday at 10. I'm sorry about the varied times, but that's kind of how it worked out. I do want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Monster Mart in Fouke, Arkansas. Okay. All right. So Monster Mart is one of our sponsors this year. The prizes in the back were donated by them. If you've never been to Monster Mart, it's an experience. I went last year. Anybody been to Monster Mart? It's fun. Look it up. They have lots of stuff with the Fouke monster, and of course the Fouke monster was that's where it came from supposedly, and that's where the Legend of Boggy Creek was filmed in Fouke. So it's a really cool place. So thank you to the ASU-Beebe marketing department. They have gone above and beyond to market this and to help us throughout this process. So thank you guys very much. We We will give away a door prize at the end, and if you're not here, I will contact you. All right, so I want to introduce one of my dear friends, Dr. Lisa Floryshak. She has agreed to be the first speaker, and I hope you're not as nervous as me. I'm kidding, because I'm nervous. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thank you for being here. But Dr. Floryshak and I worked together for many years. She's been here at ASU-Beebe for 10 years. She was born and raised in Westchester County, New York. And if you're not familiar with that area, she's going to tell you a little bit about it. She's going to tell you about a very interesting place that she grew up around. She has a doctorate in heritage studies from A-State, and she is a ceramics and silver specialist. Gorgeous jewelry she makes. Show them your earrings. I'm sure you made
No, actually,
yeah,
this
there
is
you go.
one of mine.
She is a gorgeous jewelry maker. So I want to give her the floor now. And
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So as Amber had said in my introduction, that I was born and raised just outside of New York City in a county just north of New York City called Westchester. And Sleepy Hollow is in the center part of Westchester, about 20 miles north of New York City, 25 miles north of New York City. And I grew up in the town of Somers, which is another 15 miles north of that. However, think of the distance of 15 miles here. You know, you might go 15 miles to go to the grocery store. It's very similar there in the sense that a little more populated now, but when I was growing up, it was a lot of dairy farms and a lot of rural area. And it wasn't until the late 80s when big industry really started moving into the area, and people started wanting to become or get out of New York City to and the communities became more bedroom communities to New York City. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Sleepy Hollow and the legend of Sleepy Hollow as something that maybe most people don't know. The area of Westchester was literally considered neutral ground during the Revolutionary War. It was one of those places where, even though they weren't supposed to be fighting, they were constantly under siege. And the residents of Westchester took a pummeling during the Revolution. And the trauma of that war is still very much alive in the county and in that area of New York. I want you to think about the Civil War trauma that everybody talks about. Well, Revolutionary War trauma in the Northeast is still very, very steeped in their identity and their way of going about things. And you think that was 250 years ago, so anyway, so I thought I would go through my slides about the location a little bit, just to give you an idea of what Sleepy Hollow looks like. Unfortunately, even though I've been back and forth to New York the last 6 months, like over and over again, I did not get a chance to get down there and take some pictures. So there is one picture of mine here. However, it is very near and dear to me. So this is a sculpture in the middle of town that welcomes you into the town of Sleepy Hollow. The thing that I have to tell you is that Tarrytown, now Sleepy Hollow, was not always Sleepy Hollow. It was Sleepy Hollow as a hamlet. Tarrytown, or North Tarrytown, where Pocantico Hills is, and all of this area that this legend takes place in, was actually named North Tarrytown, and it was changed in 1996. That's when they changed their name to Sleepy Hollow. And they changed it to Sleepy Hollow because the GM plant, who had been in the automobile plant, had been there since 1909, closed its doors, and they suddenly found themselves without a way to sustain the town. So they decided to market their town as the place where Washington Irving lived and Washington and worked and wrote about. And Washington Irving is like synonymous with New York culture. Our sports team, the basketball team, is the Knickerbockers, right? And Knickerbocker is one of Irving's big characters, you know. We have the Rip Van Winkle Bridge, which goes over the Hudson, you know, another one of his characters. So I want to go through these a little bit. So this is a sculpture of the Headless Horseman. And this was constructed in 1996, I believe. I can't remember the sculptor's name. I think it's because I'm so nervous, but I'm sorry. A little bit about Washington Irving. This is a direct quote from him from the sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon. He talks about how he was a adventurist. You know, he would go out and he would go and write journals and experience the world and try to find out all of these different things about what was going on around his environment. Probably, you know, we all know somebody that rambles a lot and scares the pants off their parents, but he was definitely one of those people, where he would be the town, you know where everything happened. Irving also borrowed quite a bit from other people that were around him. We'll talk about that in a minute. So here is the church, and this church still stands today. It has become a major tourist attraction. They talk about how in the fall specifically, it's hard. The town is like besieged by all of these people that want to know more about Sleepy Hollow. So here is the church, and this is Route 9, or formerly the new route of the Albany Post Road, which goes from New York City to Albany, New York, along the river. And this road was changed. The mapping of the road was changed quite a bit from Irving's time, and that was mostly just to accommodate larger traffic. And so the road originally went on the other side of the church. And every fall, they do a reenactment in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. But what's interesting is that this isn't the cemetery. The Sleepy Hollow Cemetery is not the cemetery of the story. Sleepy Hollow Cemetery was developed in 1850s by Washington Irving, or it was like a construct of let's develop this like grand cemetery to fit my stories. And the Dutch cemetery that was associated with the church is still on the church grounds, a little smaller. And I wanted to so when I read the legend of Sleepy Hollow, this little phrase has always stood out to me. Not far from the village, perhaps 2 miles, there's a little valley, rather a lap of land, among high hills, which is one of the quietest places in the whole world. A small brook glides through it, just a murmur enough to lull one to repose, and the occasional quail or trapping of a woodpecker is almost the sound that never breaks upon uniform tranquility. This is in the opening of Sleepy Hollow, the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And the picture next to it is a picture that I took when I was probably in around 2015, out mountain biking the Croton Aqueduct and Old Sleepy Hollow Road. And the area that is in like around Ravensbrook and all that has been preserved by the Rockefellers. They bought most of the land up and have made it into this great park that people can walk through and ride through. And this is where the Croton Aqueduct meets the old Sleepy Hollow Road. This is around the area where there's many sightings, they say, of the Headless Horseman, which is interesting because the Headless Horseman, there's many theories of who the Headless Horseman is. There's the Washington version, the Washington Irving version, and then there is the historical version. And it's these woods that he is said to roam in. And when I was a kid growing up, as a youngster, we were always really hooked into the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow was something that everybody celebrated in the fall. The principal of my elementary school was none other than Wayne Van Tassel, and the Van Tassels were a family that were notable in the town of Tarrytown, and Washington Irving modeled some of his characters off of that name and immortalized that name. And when I became older, high school probably, we used to walk into the woods here, and we would go into the woods. It wasn't too far from this place we used to hang out a lot. And we'd go into the woods at midnight, or late after dark, and challenge each other to not be scared. And it was always quite the fright. Somebody would always jump out from behind a tree. This is the Pecantico Brook, not the bridge, the cemetery bridge that takes place in the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Is a little bit further south of this, and non-existent, though there is a sign there that talks about this is the place where the bridge once was. But this is the trail going up to Ravensbrook, or the Ravens Rock, in Pecantico Hills, or in the Rockefeller Preserve. And there we have Ravens Rock. So we talk about that legend. The legend basically is a legend of maybe. Well, let's go through these slides. Here we got the church again. I'm sorry, the Dutch cemetery. So let me go back to the legend. So talking about the legend, we have these characters, right? We have a school teacher, Ichabod Crane, who shows up in Sleepy Hollow, New York. And it's this small town, very tight-knit community of farmers. Most of them were working as tenant farmers for Phillips, who was Frederick Phillips III, who owned most of the southern part of Westchester County. And that estate, Phillipsburg Manor, was named a manor by the British, and they were loyalists. Okay, and most of the people in town were not very wealthy. They were just trying to get by, And here comes this school teacher, Ichabod Crane, who is, kind of full of himself and really, really into the work of Cotton Mather. Anybody know who Cotton Mather was?
Preacher?
He was more of a scientist, but preacher, yeah, we can go that way. Know what he's known for.
Salem witch trials?
Yep, the Salem witch trials. Okay, so he's yeah. So Ichabod Crane shows up really being steeped. Like, he has two books, the Bible and Cotton Mather's book. That was it. So he is Puritan. He's from New England. He is a loyalist to the crown, and the townspeople don't really take to him. He had weird habits, right? What would he do? He would spend his days walking through the cemetery reading gravestones. You know? But he would do this. He would do that as a way, the way he would think to court women, right? He would bring them after church to the cemetery and walk through the cemetery and think that they would fall in love with him because he could read the gravestones.
That's how I got Scott.
So he would do this, and then you've got this townspeople. There's, the Van Tassels, who were wealthy. It's thought that maybe the Van Tassels were modeled after the Phillips. And then you have, because the Van Tassel family was not wealthy, they were tenant farmers of that era. They were tenant farmers. So you had the Van Tassels. You had Brom Bones, who's like big burly farmer guy that, again, a farmer working in the community, just trying to make a life for himself or with his family, right? And he's a jokester, right? He likes to ride fast horses. He likes to play pranks on people. He likes to just be the life of the party, right? And then you have this Ichabod Crane looking like kind of gangly and lanky and not attractive in any sense of the word, and has weird habits and is socially awkward, So we have that play going on. And you have Ichabod also, besides trying to court women through reading gravestones, trying to court women by teaching them music, where it's like he's not doing the official, he's getting out of that official family accepted courting, right? Where you come on Sunday afternoons and you visit with the family. I'm here to visit with you. Let's hear what you have to say, that kind of thing. Let's see what the family is like. The relationship is chaperoned. So you've got Crane working outside of all of that, right? And then you have this confrontation, right? Where they like to sit around and tell ghost stories. They still do that. Sitting around telling war stories and ghost stories still happens. It happens here though too, right? People are intrigued by that. And they would sit around and tell ghost stories and tell stories of the war, because the war had only happened 40 to 50 years before this is set, in Sleepy Hollow. So there's still some freshness to it, And Ichabod Crane, instead of just embellishing on the war stories or listening to the war stories, turns around and says, well, I've got one, and he comes out with Cotton Mather's stuff, right? So it's kind of like there's a dullness there. And then there's the suspicion that he gets cornered by the headless horseman who runs him out of town. Who do you think the headless horseman was? I kind of think Irving gives us a little bit of a cue into that.
Brom Bones?
There's at the end, right? With Dietermeyer, we find, Dietrich, we find that there's a Dietrich Knickerbocker. We find that there's an awful lot of play there where we actually think that maybe he's Brom Bones. He is now a politician or of some wealth, a wealthy historian, according to Irving, who has made his way in the world. And then you have him talking to a group of lawyers, and one of them just the interchange, you get to feeling like one of the lawyers he's talking to is actually Ichabod Crane, who has not really done much more for himself than just study law and be one of a crowd. And so here we have, back to the slide, sorry, one of the old Dutch graves. So that the cemetery that's actually on the side of the church or within the church grounds was developed in the 1650s. And here, the grave with the flags is in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and that is Washington Irving's grave. So he is buried there along with Andrew Carnegie is buried in that cemetery. Here is a postcard of the Cranes Mill, which they are pretty sure they know where it was on the Contigo Creek. The description is not, it doesn't really get called Cranes Mill in Irving's work, but he describes it well enough that everybody knows it's Cranes Mill. And they're not, it doesn't exist anymore. They think it went out sometime around the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century. However, also it was modeled after, this is Phillipsburg Manor, the mill at Phillipsburg Manor as well, which is just a few miles down the creek, down Conoco Creek. And it's still, this is a historic site, still open today. You can go and visit.
Dutch style?
Yeah, so if you understand how this area was developed, you know, New Amsterdam was developed by the Dutch, or New York City was developed by the Dutch. And as they moved further away from the city, you had big Dutch enclaves. So a lot of Westchester were Dutch settlers, particularly this area. But this was I think his manor at one time, the Phillips Manor at one time, was 81 square acres of land. That's huge. You know, that's like 3 towns, 4 towns worth of land. And he divided it up into small little farms that he would have people farm. And it had its own church, which was the Dutch church. It had its own, and many of the farmers did attend the Dutch church. It had a whole downtown with, you know, different businesses, and so on. So it was a self-sustaining community. I'm sure that Phillips, because of the way things happened, had a big hand in, you know, the money that came out of the community. So this is a map. I want to get back to the Revolutionary War history a little bit. It was considered neutral ground, as I had mentioned earlier. Here, right around here, oh, let's see, where is it? Sorry. Right around here is Tarrytown. This is where the area around Sleepy Hollow is, right down here. Manhattan is here. This is Tarrytown. I grew up like right over here at this part of the Croton River. Here was one of the entry points for the Battle of White Plains, which was one of the big battles in Westchester. And there's thought that the Headless Horseman, you know, Washington Irving drew a lot of his characters from experience. Remember, I told you he was really avid journalist. From experience, from talking to friends. And we see one of the Revolutionary War soldiers, John Paulding, being one of his really close family friends and contributing quite a bit to his writing. And if you look, there's an 1899 New York Times article about John Paulding's relationship with Washington Irving. And John Paulding has some writing that was published shortly after Washington Irving published Sleepy Hollow. And the writing was done in the 1790s, so before Irving was born, or just after Irving was born. And that writing is very eerily similar to some of it to the legend of Sleepy Hollow. John Paulding was credited, he was one of the 3 militiamen that were credited with capturing John Andre. And John Andre was a loyalist and a spy who was carrying the plans that Benedict Arnold had given him to hand over West Point to the British. So he was considered a traitor. And he was caught just outside of Sleepy Hollow, or actually right in Sleepy Hollow, right at where it's thought that the tree, that big tulip tree that they describe as being that menacing tree in the tale, was actually the tree that John Andre was caught under. There was on Route 9, that area right around where I had shown you that woods picture. There used to be a big tulip tree there. It was hit by lightning and had come down long ago. But they think that was the area where John Andre was caught. And how he was caught was Paulding had been a prisoner of war in New York City, held by the British, and he was let out, and he was wearing a Hessian coat, or he not let out, he escaped, and he was wearing a Hessian coat to escape. And the Hessians were like this group of German soldiers that were probably forced into conscription by the British government, and they were really very well feared, and they taunted Westchester like to no end. And so the thought is that the Headless Horseman was this man that had died sometime during the Revolutionary War by being beheaded by a cannonball. And the only reason he couldn't go to his grave, or not to his grave, to heaven, was because he couldn't find his head. And his head was like roaming around, or somewhere lost in Westchester. And so he would ride at night trying to find his head. That is the essence of Irving's lore, right? Is that you have this soldier who is riding around trying to find his head. There's the thought that some of the tale comes actually, though, from the capture of General Andre. The other thing that is interesting about, that was my last slide, about Revolutionary War history, is that when we look at Irving's work and we look at all of the things he's talking about, right? So he's got these Hessian soldiers that have been conscripted into service. He's got this outsider who is really into that Puritan way. And then you have a nation at the time, young nation, trying to find their identity, number one. You have the New England area and New York becoming more secular and less Puritan, less tied to their Puritan roots. And then you have the addition of all of this land that we're sitting in now, that all of a sudden there's this new kind of revolutionary battle going on where you have, all of this land added, all of these new people added, and there's a battle going on about whether or not they should be American citizens because they weren't part of the 13 colonies, and should we automatically accept them? And who are these people? And the more that battle raged on, there's I think Irving, this is just this, I'm surmising this, I think Irving was poking fun in a satirical way at the more this battle raged on between whether or not we should accept the new people under this new government, the more it raged on, the more evangelical, like the evangelical movement starts about the same time as that battle is raging. So there's the more religious the people that were living on the other side of that divide became. And so I think Irving, in some senses, is telling people, wake up and look at your own history. Look at what you fought for, got rid of, don't let it happen and repeat itself. And growing up in Westchester, revolutionary, like I had said in the beginning, Revolutionary War history was something that we were taught like as if it happened yesterday. You're not allowed to forget it. You went to the sites, you visited, you read things about it, and you really tried to deal with that, understanding that trauma of being basically imposed upon. You had farmers that really didn't have any kind of opinion, but they were being beat up by both sides, So that's my thought on Washington Irving and the tale of Sleepy Hollow, the legend of Sleepy Hollow. We have to remember that legends a lot of times have some grain of truth to them. There's some story that generated that legend, and where it came from, we won't actually know, because Irving was kind of a jokester. That we can only think, just coming from that area, knowing the town, knowing my own connection to it. This is my thoughts on Washington Irving's New York and Sleepy Hollow. So, thank you.
Dr. Floryshak, if you guys have not signed in for the floor prize, y'all can do that